purchase, whether it's 60 months or 48 months or 84 months or RV financing. You're financing that vehicle and you're paying interest on it. So those are two of the exact comparison. You're making payments and you're paying towards your principal. Those are all the exact same comparison. So in that reference, it's exactly as, I mean, you're buying a vehicle. There's only one difference between a repurchase and buying on a conventional type purchase is we're guaranteeing back at in 6 months or a year or 2 years, however long that repurchase is set up for. So there's only one difference. What tends to happen a lot of times is we put fancy names on things, and as soon as you put a fancy name on it, guess what? It's all complicated. Repurchase isn't complicated at all. They're simply buying a vehicle on conventional financing, but we've just got terminology in there that says we're going to buy that vehicle back at a certain point at a certain price. So I want to break it down, and if you'll look at this document right here, let's say they purchased the vehicle for $100,000. They're doing RV financing, so they put $15,000 down and they keep it for 1 year. They're going to pay approximately $4,150 in equity. So they have a balance or a payoff at the end of a year of $80,850. The investment that they put into the vehicle is $15,000. If you take the repurchase price of $700 times 12, that's $8,400. So the difference between the balance, and if you guys are seeing this, the balance that they owe on their loan and the 91.6 that we're giving them back. Are you guys with me on this? Okay, is $8,400. So if you subtract that from the $15,000, the actual investment that they made, they've got $8,400 equity, so the actual investment they made was only $6,600 for that entire year. So it cost them $550 a month to drive that vehicle for a year. I guarantee you, if you look at that in comparison to a large SUV they might be driving, that's going to be a lot less holding cost than what they would be driving an SUV. So in all actuality, a repurchase is a very, very good thing for a customer. So in the context of trying to sell it to them, if you help them understand that we're doing something really, really good for them. In fact, I will tell you that when we put a pencil to the numbers, Stacy and I talked about this morning. We talked about it last week. We had a guy turn in a lease that he had only had 3 months, and we only charged him repurchase, and the cost, we only charged him $2,400, or 4 months it was maybe. That didn't even cover our upfront cost on that repurchase. So it's a really good thing for a customer. It's not such a good thing for us. We'll probably at some point relook at these repurchase numbers that we're guaranteeing the customer. Does anybody have any questions on the math, how that breaks down?
Yes, I do. Where did the equity paid come from?
Pardon?
Where did the equity paid come from?
Okay, they're making a monthly payment. So on a $100,000 loan, putting $15,000 down, he's going to be making, or they're going to be making a monthly payment of about $672 a month for the first year. Of that $672, if you take that over the course of a year, about $4,000 of that money that they paid is going to be going towards equity. The rest of it they're paying on principal.
So that's not a number we can quote, like each deal is going to be different depending on all of that. Okay.
Each deal is going to be different, but you can use this formula, which is the purchase price, the down payment, and they're going to be making a payment. So they're going to be paying equity towards the balance they owe on the vehicle. Unlike if they were just leasing or renting a vehicle while we were building their van, they would be paying a monthly lease payment and they would not be paying any equity. So in this scenario, they end up with $8,400 of equity that they're applying towards the price of their new van. Are you guys with me on that? So if you deduct the $8,400 from their $15,000 initial investment, that's what their true cost is for driving that van for a year. Again, this document's going to be on Zoho, so you guys can look through it. You can plug in different numbers, and if you go to the payment doc that I've showed you guys, I think it's called Credit Karma. They actually have a tab. It's called amortization. You can plug in the price, the amount they're financing. You can plug in the term of the loan, and you can plug in an interest rate. And you can look at every single year and see how much equity they've paid and how much interest they've paid.
Hey, Ted, question.
Just a second. I want to be careful quoting those exact numbers because, again, that's just an estimate, but that gives you a real good idea of where they're at. Yes, Josh?
So is your monthly depreciation your $700 a month times 12? Is that what you had? Is that what the
No,
depreciation on the unit is?
the $700 a month is your depreciation. So 12 times 700 is $84 or $8,400.
Correct.
So it's cost them $8,400
To use that for a year.
$15,000. I explained that wrong. I apologize.
Yeah. So that's $8,400 that they're paying for a year to utilize that vehicle, basically.
Exactly.
As opposed to $80 a day times 365 or
Exactly.
whatever they did if they rented.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So any other questions?
Yeah, I have one question, Ted. Are we making the standard amount of depreciation 700?
The docs, and if you'll look right here on the documents that when you fill out a repurchase agreement, I've got notes in here, and it tells you how to fill this thing out. So the flat depreciation, I have 700 in there right now, but Stacy and I are going to talk, and I'm going to have a number that you're going to use all the time. So when you get ready to fill out a repurchase, you're going to be able to go to this doc, and until you get used to filling them out all the time, you're going to actually have the numbers that you can plug in there. So once I get this finished up, there'll be a number in there.
So to be clear, that's not going to be dependent on the VIN number any longer, or like the specific unit?
Yeah, it will be, Josh. So for example, if you're on a non-VDI unit, there's going to be a standard number that you're going to put in there. If it's on a passenger van, there's going to be a standard number you're going to put in there. Or if it's on a VDI unit, there's going to be a standard number.
But for, I guess, non-VDI units, I mean, those can range anywhere from $20,000 to $80,000 in price, right?
Exactly. And Josh, this is a very good point to bring up. The thing that, the reason I'm putting that information on there, that gives you guidelines so that when you're talking with customers or for your information, you've got some basic information. But Josh is exactly right. So when you are, when you're wanting to really get down to the point of selling a non-VDI on a repurchase, you want to make sure that you call me and we discuss and talk through what that's like. There's a lot of times I'll call Brent directly and say, hey, I've got this unit. It's a non-VDI. What do you think depreciation? So it is very specific to the vehicle. Again, this document that has the notes on it is just a guideline, because what you guys don't realize, every time we do a repurchase, I'll get a call from somebody saying, okay, I think I know what number goes in here, but let's make sure. So
okay, so to clarify, that chart is a guideline structure for us to, on a phone call, be able to give some rough estimates. And then we will need, when specific units picked out, we'll need to run that by you and say, can we get a specific depreciation number like normal?
Yeah, there's a better way to say it. This document's going to be a reference for you to use when filling it out, and a reference when you're working. Maybe that you don't quote specifically to a customer, but it's going to give you some talking points for a customer so that you can look that up and have it in front of you.
Yeah, so Kayla, you typically have to give Ted a VIN number or specific, like I'm looking for a 2018 mid-roof passenger van with around this many miles, to be able to get a specific depreciation number, like final number to put on the stock.
So guys, I'm not even sure that you would be going over this form with them until you have it completed and have the information needed.
Correct.
Because it's not going to be a pre-sent form for them to review. It's going to need to be completed. So you're going to have your conversations with Ted, and his talking points are a way to help you explain it to the customer when you're going over that document with them.
For me, the way it's worked is I've talked to the client about, like, hey, here's an idea if you're looking for a van. This stops you from going and making a mistake and overpaying for a vehicle when really you, at long term, want to be in a van, do it. So, we just have had a lot of people make $50,000 mistakes. So it's our way of trying to, make it work. Okay. But all I have to say, we kind of agree on that. We then say, roughly, here's what the range of where I've seen them fall in. So depending on the unit we picked. So then we'll usually look on like Van Do It's inventory site for non-Van Do It. We'll kind of pick a unit out, like typically we pick like 1 to 3 units out. And then I'll shoot those to Ted and say, Ted, could you get me depreciation on this passenger van, this DIY camper van, and this pull behind trailer? And Ted will shoot those back. I'll present those to the client, and then they'll say, yeah, we want to go with this one. Say, great, I'm going to put that in repurchase. Here's going to be the miles. Here's going to be the specific depreciation. Here's the purchase price. And we hit everything, and that's when I go over the doc. So
No, I get that. I just was asking because Ted said you said you wanted us to get away from calling you asking what that amount was going to be. So I don't know how we'd get away from calling you if we're not saying the amount.
Okay, then I misquoted. What I'm saying is, when you're talking with the customer, and maybe we're initially talking about a repurchase. So, for example, if you look at the document right here, it says number of days the agreement will be in place from the date of delivery. That note's going to say something along the lines of the normal agreement is going to be a 12-month agreement. But you can turn that in early. After Stacy and I talk, there's going to be some type of penalty or something if they turn it in too early. But there's going to be educational notes so that when you're talking with a customer or getting ready to explain a repurchase to a customer, you can go down to this thing that says number of days to agreement and see those notes in there. There's also going to be notes in regards to if they want to extend that longer than 12 months, what that's going to look like. So instead of calling me saying, well, what if they turn it in early? That note's going to be on there. What if they want to keep it longer? What if their bill takes longer than 12 months? What if it's a 14-month bill? Those notes are going to be on there. So I'm going to answer some general questions on here for you so that every time that we do a repurchase, I don't get asked those same questions over and over, and you understand it more thoroughly so that you can explain it to a customer. That's what those notes are going to be for. So, for example, the flat monthly depreciation, I'm going to say, whatever number Stacy and I come up, this is what the average is, but there can be reasons that it's different, yada, yada, yada. So it's just going to be talking points for you to talk with the customer. As Stacy said, something you're going to send to the customer and show them, but as you're talking with the customer about repurchase, guess what? You're going to have notes right here so that you can talk through that and answer questions. It's being intentional, having all the information in front of you.
So Ted, I also want to be clear, when we're completing this document, and if you could put notes on this document for that as well, Ted, that would be great. So the delivery date is always left blank because when they pick that unit up, that's when the number of days starts for their repurchase. So we aren't going to know that today we're not going to know that until they actually come and get the unit, and that's scheduled through production.
Yeah,
And
I
then-
actually have that note on there already, as well as the mileage on the vehicle. Those are the kind of questions that, again, every time we do a repurchase, I get a call saying, what should I put in here? But again, you're going to have a document as a reference point so that you'll have those general questions answered.
And then I would also clarify, whenever you do the vehicle associated to this agreement, it should be, and I think it will all fit, the year, make, and VIN should go in there. Not the stock number, because the stock number has no reference to our client whatsoever.
So if it's a unit being built, we leave it blank.
Unless there's been a unit, well, a repurchase should only be on a van that's ready to be completed. So you should already have a VIN assigned for the unit.
And Stacy, you'll get a copy of this, so as always, you'll be able to clean up my notes and make it make sense. So, yeah.
Ted, one question in my head, I have this happen like 15% of the time, is clients are concerned with the mileage. We give them, I don't know, like they might drive a crap ton for work or something. So in the case of a client saying, well, hey, that's not enough miles or whatever, and I know it's contextual in the unit, but maybe how to address that question might be a good thing to put on your doc.
Okay. I will do that. When you're talking mileage, our maximum mileage cap is 20,000 miles a year. So, if they truly keep it a year and they drive 10,000 miles for the first 2 or 3 months and then they turn that thing in, we're going to prorate that out. There is going to be a penalty because that vehicle with 10,000 miles on it in 3 months loses value versus having 6,000, 2,000 miles a month. So those are all things that we look at. Any other questions on the form? Okay, the two other points that I want to talk through is the reasons for doing a repurchase, and then the reasons that we, as a company, it's not good for us to do a repurchase. So first of all, the reasons for doing a repurchase. The security. We've done 2 or 3 different repurchases where a customer says, what's my safety net? If I buy this vehicle and I figure out in 6 months or a year or 2 years, whatever time limit we put on that, and this vehicle's not for me, then I want to be able to know that, I can get out of it. So it's for a security reason. That's a very good reason for doing a repurchase. We can also eliminate concerns with the timeline. We've had customers that we basically we did all the different things that we try to do to overcome the timeline, but there comes a point where they said that, I'm in Billy's customers, we just did one. I'm going to be in Colorado for the next 8 months, and I've got to have a van. So if I've got to wait 14 months or 12 months or even 10 months, this isn't going to work for me. So I'm going to have to go buy another van someplace else if you can't get me a van. So in that situation, we did a repurchase on a VDI unit in order to get them into a van. So eliminating the timeline, that's another good reason for doing it. We've used it for a closing tool in different situations where customers, they had a security issue or they had a timeline issue, or they just simply, needed the combination of, the security, the timeline or whatever, and we used it to close the deal. It's also a very, very good tool to be able to utilize those non-VDI units that we have a lot of. We bought those units specifically for selling, but we've also bought them for repurchase, knowing that our timelines are really long. So we have those units that we can do those repurchase on. And I will tell you, in the situation with the non-VDI units, that is a good thing for the company. So if we can do a repurchase on a non-VDI, very seldom will you hear me say no on that. But doing a repurchase on a VDI unit, not very many situations does the company come out in a good situation on those. So, I want to get away from the aspect of trying to sell repurchase, but I want you to look at a repurchase as a tool. I don't know if you guys have seen that commercial on TV where the old guy's sitting beside the engine, and he said there's tools and there's, I think he says causes or whatever. This mask is a tool. A repurchase is a tool in our bag of things that we can use to close deals or help customers with. That's just one more tool. Reasons that we do not like to use a repurchase is it's a very costly thing with very little return. For example, when I use the illustration, we got that lease back in, we only collected $2,400. So if you think about it, we recon that vehicle to send it out, make sure it's in good shape. A lot of times we have to put tires on the vehicle, we have to put brakes on them, we run them to the dealership, we do all the things to make sure that vehicle is in good shape. It goes out, it gets used, comes back in, and we have to repeat that process over again. We pay commissions on it. A lot of the cost that we spend to send a vehicle out, we duplicate that cost again when we bring it back in. So you can see real quickly how only collecting $2,400 worth of value from that van wasn't profitable at all. And now we've got a vehicle that's got probably 5, 6, 7,000 miles in addition to the mileage that was on it, and we've got to recondition it. So, it's kind of like renting a house. You rent a house for 3 months, and guess what? You probably are going to have to go back in and recondition it, recollect deposits and do all the things to get it ready for the next renter. So it's a very short timeline. You don't collect a lot of profit, and it's very costly. Another reason is there's risk of damages. We've got that vehicle out there running around. It can get damaged. That can be very, very costly. And I don't know if you guys have realized that Billy and I have had some lengthy conversations on this, but the costs are duplicated. So ultimately, if we're selling a van, do it, and we're doing a repurchase in order to do it, we're building a van. So we've got all the costs with building a van. We're doing a repurchase, so that vehicle has come back in from a purchase or trade-in. So we are reconditioning it, bringing it up to the right specs, getting it ready to go out. So we've got all the cost involved with that. We pay commissions, we send it out, we bring it back in, and then in order for it to be ready to go out again, we duplicate a lot of those same expenses. So in order to sell one van, do it, we've got 3 different conditioning costs in it. We've paid 2 sets of commissions. We've paid accounting. We've paid production. It's a very costly thing to do, repurchase. And if you look at it in a very basic light, we've put a vehicle out, we haven't made any money on it, we put more miles on it, the condition of it a lot of times is less, so we've put something out, we haven't got any income off of it, and the value of it's less now than it was when we sent it out. Does that sound like a profitable thing? Not at all. So that's why we want to get away from those if we can. The other thing is, on a repurchase, we're basically sending out a vehicle, if you want to call it, we're sending out, it's going to come back in to do all that again versus just selling it. It's done and gone. And then the final thing is, taking inventory. And in the car business, we say that, vehicles don't just sit on the lot, because when they're sitting there not being used, things stop working. You have to pay insurance on them. You have to pay interest on them. They have to be kept clean. They have to be maintained. So it's kind of like owning an animal. You're putting expenses into it. So it is costing you sitting there, but sitting on your lot till you get it sold versus having it out running around, you're paying all those costs because you still own it, or most of those costs, plus it's losing value because somebody's using it. So in a lot of situations, it's almost better to have the thing sitting on our lot versus having it out running around. Those are all the reasons that it's not good for us to do a repurchase. Am I trying to talk you guys out of doing them? No. I'm just wanting you to see the big picture, and I'm wanting you to understand that, I don't want to be proactive and go out and sell these things. Again, it's just a tool to get a job done if we need to use it. Does that make sense? Okay, so the last thing that I want to cover with repurchase is questions that a customer might ask. I have 3 different questions that I hear you guys ask me all the time. Does the price of the vehicle have the same consideration on a repurchase as on a conventional sale? The answer is no. Why? Because when we're doing a repurchase, this vehicle, and if you'll look at my screen, they purchase it for $100,000 and they're paying $700 a month depreciation. Whether that number is $1 million or whether that number is $100,000, they're paying $700 a month depreciation. The only variance to this is if they're financing $100,000 versus $200,000 or $300,000, it's going to cost them a little bit more in interest. But if you go on the amortization Credit Karma thing and look, the difference between $105,000 or $110,000 or $130,000, even $150,000 versus $100,000, you're talking pennies on the dollar. So really, the price that they're paying for the vehicle is nominal. It makes no difference. A good tool to use would be the amortization chart on Credit Karma, so that when they're saying, well, but it's costing me the extra interest, if you go in and plug those numbers in, you'll see that it's actually only costing them, $10 a month or, $5 a month extra to pay another $10,000 or $15,000. The other question is the customers, or you guys have asked, they said, or what they want to know, what's the customer really paying? What's it really costing them? It's costing them the depreciation, which is $700 a month, and it's costing them the interest they pay monthly. That's their true cost for owning that vehicle. Insurance isn't a cost that you can say it's costing, because if they were being built, they're going to be paying insurance on it. Property tax. If they were driving the van, they're purchasing or were building, they would be paying property tax on it. All those things are moot points simply because they'd be paying that regardless. The only thing in addition to a conventional purchase is the depreciation and the interest. Another question we get asked is, why will we only do repurchase on certain vehicles? Why won't you do repurchase on a brand new inventory unit that comes out? And I've answered that for several of you several different times, but looking at the things that we talked about, the small return that we get on it, the risk of damages, the duplicated cost, the vehicle returns. When we have an inventory unit that typically sells within just a few hours of hitting the market, why would we want to do a repurchase that we hardly make anything on, that we're reducing the value of it, that it's going to come back in and we're going to have to duplicate those reconditioning costs, when we can just sell it straight up out the door and be done with it? The reasons that we do repurchase are on units that come back in that we bought that maybe have some miles on them. The Angie Hyman van, you'll hear me refer to it. That's the very first van that Van Do It ever built. we're never probably going to sell that. So we can capture some income off of it by doing a repurchase. I'll probably always do repurchase on that up to a point. We've got a couple other vans that we're doing repurchase on that they're an older style of van, so we can do some upfitting, we can do some reconditioning on, but at some point we're probably going to have to refab those things and bring them way up. So until we do that, we can do repurchase on them. So that's some of the thinking behind the scenes that I think about when you guys ask me, can we do a repurchase on it? So I want you to be intentional, think about it, so that when a customer says, well, can I do a repurchase on this inventory unit, you don't have to call Ted and say, will you do repurchase on it? On the tip of your tongue, you can say, probably not. Repurchase is very expensive for the company. We do that, we have all the reconditioning costs, and you guys can spit this off just like that. And guess what? You've shut the customer down. How many times have you had a customer ask you a question and you say, I don't know what the answer to that is, or you maybe give them a partial answer and you tell them I'll get back with you. And while the customer's waiting on you to get back with them, you're trying to get a hold of me or Jared or whatever. So the customer's thinking, maybe there's a shot, especially if they've asked you, will they do a repurchase on an inventory van or something that they're thinking, maybe there's a shot they can get that done. When in reality, there was never a possibility that what they were asking could be done. Or if you have the answers, you can answer it right up front and tell them straight up that can't be done and this is why it can't be done. Then you get them answered quickly, and there's never even a moment where the customer thinks there's a possibility that there's a opportunity for the question they asked to be done or be handled in a way that, like a repurchase on an inventory unit. Does that make sense? You guys are being intentional. You're answering the question you can answer up front because you have all the information. Billy and I had a conversation 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he said there's a lot of things, if we just had all the information, we could answer it and have a happier customer quicker, more satisfied, and eliminate a lot of concerns if we just had those answers. So,
and to Brent always says if you answer a concern the first time around and just hit it between the eyes, it has a less chance of coming up between let me get back to you.
Exactly. So, any questions on repurchase?
The only question, what I've had come back to me is when people question having to pay taxes and registration as well as the monthly fee. But I think some states, they only pay taxes once. I'm not sure. I think that has come up. But I'm thinking that my answer to them is really, in the grand scheme of things, they're still paying less for the repurchase than they would with any other solution.
The repurchase would be just like a trade-in. So if you buy that vehicle for $100,000 and you're trading in a vehicle, or we're buying that, that's going to come off of the purchase price of the next vehicle. So you're only going to pay the difference between the two.
Are you talking about taxes or just the cost of it? Sales tax. Okay, gotcha.
The one thing I want to note.
Keep in mind, just a second, keep in mind on sales tax that not every state in the United States pays sales tax either.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You're right. Yep.
Wait, so to be clear, they will pay sales tax on both vans that they purchase.
But they only pay the difference in it's the net amount, Alan. So if they pay, on $50,000 on the chassis part of the first unit, and they trade that back in, and we give them, it's $45,000, then they're only going to pay the sales tax on the $5,000 difference.
I see.
Yeah, so you have to remember there's a trade involved, so that trade is going to reduce the amount of the second sales tax requirement.
Like extensively.
state?
Again, the simplest way to
That's
look
really
at it,
good to know.
on the document that I've got on my screen, the purchase price is $100,000. So if the vehicle they're purchasing is higher priced, say it's $120,000, they're only going to pay the difference of $20,000 on the next vehicle.
Is there any time cap on that?
Every state is different on their requirements. So, for example, the state of Missouri is 6 months that they have to be able to roll that sales tax over. But I know, like the state of Washington, it has it's like a year, 12 months. So there are some variables involved in that. But the that's if they were buying and not trading.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So since a repurchase would always be should always be most generally a trade situation, then they would only pay the difference always on a repurchase.
And you have to realize that's most times it's going to happen when they are picking up their vans. So they pick up one, drop off the other. So that transaction would more than likely be immediately within that time frame. Any other questions?
I just want to make one note. The repurchase does not block them from selling the van themselves, which maybe we need to put something in there in case it's a Van Do It for that. You know what I mean? Because we want the Van Do It back. But as far as non-VDI units, if they use the argument, well, yeah, I buy a van here and resell it because I live in the Northwest. I mean, we're not blocking you from taking that non-Van Do It unit and going to sell it yourself, if that makes sense. So, like, if you think you can get a higher dollar and not end up having to pay $700 a month in depreciation on this example, but say you only ended up paying $400 because you sold it for more than what we offered as a buyback, they can still do that. It's just they've got this in their back pocket should they have trouble selling it.
Again, and there's going to be the document that I'm doing the training off of that I'll have on Zoho as well. But the thing you've got to remember, the 3 points that I made in the very beginning, they're buying a vehicle, they're financing it, or paying for it, they're making payments, and they're paying towards the principal, or they paid cash for it. So they can sell it, they can trade it, they can do whatever they want to do with it. They own the vehicle. And just look at it in the context, there's only one difference. They have a vehicle they bought, purchased, they're making payments for, or they own. We just give them a guaranteed value that we'll buy it back for.